KoitCast. Today's guest is an internationally recognized intuitive with more than 4 decades of experience serving clients worldwide. She is a lifelong student of intuition, science, religion, philosophy, metaphysics and art. Please give a huge Koit welcome to Cay Randall-May. Hi Cay, welcome to KoitCast.
Thank you, Koit. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk with you today, and we'll just see what comes up and what we want to talk about.
Exactly, and where it goes, and I like that.
Where
Right,
it goes, yes.
let's jump in then directly about who you are. So, who are you? Where are you from? Anything you want to say about yourself?
My name is Cay Randall-May, and I am from Phoenix, Arizona, having been born in Phoenix and raised here. In other words, I'm a Western girl. We call them desert rats. I love the desert and wouldn't live anywhere else. Grew up in Phoenix in a family where I was the only child and the only grandchild, with my 2 full-time parents and 2 full-time grandparents. Here in the Phoenix area, I had a tremendous amount of quality time with my grandmother, who was a psychic, but she was not doing it necessarily for money, because she really didn't need to earn a living that way. But she did mentor me in many ways from the time I was little. And I was always told that I had the second sight. And that this, of course, came directly from my grandmother's mother, who came from Ireland many years ago, back in the days of the terrible potato famine, when so
Yes.
many people came abroad. And so my great-grandmother came from Ireland at that point. I have no idea what part of Ireland she came from. But she then gave to her children all kinds of stories about other dimensions. I'll just put it that way. And also, just through the activities that she had, where they were playing and it was games and such, really it was training. So grandmother trained me in many of the skills that I have today, starting from the time I was a preschooler. I mean, just because I spent so much time, we always lived together in the same household or just within a block of each other.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Now, before we jump into the gift side of things and intuition, etc., before you started to explore that side of yourself, what route did you take in life?
Well, I was always interested in this. So in first grade, as people often do, you talk to your friends, what do you want to do when you grow up? Or what are you going to do? And many would be teachers, or they'd be nurses or whatever. And I said I wanted to be a scientist priestess. And that is exactly what I am.
Oh, amazing. Not many people
And
can
then,
claim that, can they?
and then in the freshman year of high school here in Phoenix, in English class, I remember one of the first essays we were assigned was write what you choose to do in life. When I decided I wanted to write it on parapsychology, a new science. And so I defined it. And of course, this was back in the 50s. And I defined it and saw my role in it. And I do more than what I could even have imagined at that time. So I have always remembered past lives, and I
Oh,
have always had a sense of why I was here and what I was going to do. Maybe not some of the fine minutiae of how it would unfold, but I'm one of those people who's self-actualized. If you think of that pyramid, the pyramid we learn about in Psychology 101,
hmm.
Maslow's pyramid of human hierarchies. I dwell at the apex. I am self-actualized. So this means I get to use my talents however I choose. I'm constantly growing, constantly unfolding. It's a delightful journey.
How many people do you think are like yourself in that respect? Because from my perspective, when I was at school, most people did not know what they wanted to do in life.
I have no idea how many people. I think that it's a gift to be able to at least have a focus or a direction. It was very clear to me there were other things that I tried that, and the school, would clearly expose you to different things. I didn't seem to have a lot of talent in athletics. I laughed because I still remember the frustration in grade school of trying to run and do long jump. You know what long jump is? Where
Oh
you
yeah, yeah,
run
yeah.
and then I could never even make it into the sand box,
Yeah.
into the sand. And they kept saying, "Kay, the point of this is to jump here and land in the sand." I tried my best. I couldn't even do it. I was always the kid that nobody wanted on the team as far as that went. But I excelled in chess, learning chess in eighth grade, and ended up being the not just the president of the chess club for 4 years in high school, but the mascot as well, and the only girl in the chess club. And I excelled in science. I excelled in academics. I did sing and I was in choir and studied French, and also I was in the French club. But it was clear to me I was not going to be a ballet dancer. I was not going to be, that.
Yeah, physical. You're going to
And
use this instead. Yeah.
right. And my parents, particularly my mother and grandmother, forbid me to just go into nursing or being a school teacher. They
Mm.
said I had to do something different. Right from the beginning. I come from a family where women were very, I'm going to say, even though I had my mother and my grandmother were married, they were both very strong women,
Hmm.
very self-actualized women in many ways. And grandmother had been an owner of a business. She had graduated from nursing college early in her life, run businesses, and people would call her, her name was Winifred. They called her Win.
Hmm.
And my first name is also Winifred, but they call me Kay for the middle name. And they would say, Win, I've lost my car keys, or I've lost this, or whatever, find them. And so she would do that. And she's the one who really taught me about remote viewing from the time I was really little.
Yeah,
And
and
so
pushed you onto that path.
they
Yeah.
always had this feeling that I should drive a car. I should know how to drive a car, and I should, not necessarily be overshadowed by others.
Yeah, sure. So your keen interests in the logics then took you into your background, which is science and biology. Can you explain a bit about how that came about? Or
Originally, I wanted to go into parapsychology.
hmm.
However, in the 1950s, in Phoenix, Arizona, there was nowhere you could study parapsychology. I began studying it on my own, even in grade school. And I studied the work of Rhine, J.B. Rhine. I was working with the cards, and all of that, and doing all kinds of intuitive work on learning meditation. My grandmother was a spiritualist as well as being a good Catholic. Took me to the spiritualist church, so I was getting mediumship training even from the time I was a teenager. But there was no formal education for that, so I had to choose a science that I wanted to go into. It was clear that from my testing and everything, that I was not that good in math right from the very beginning. I even had to be tutored to learn how to add. Math just seemed to not be my long suit. So I didn't want to go into a science that would be too math based. And I chose biology, and I think it's a very good choice. I've always loved creatures of all sorts, and I'm an artist. And so many biologists are really artists. So I did a lot of drawing and painting right from the time I was in grade school. And loved insects in particular. We used to play with them. And, in Great Britain, I don't think you have the great big ants that we have here in
No, no.
Arizona.
Our ants are about
Uh,
this big. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're called pogos. Pogonomyrmex is the
Oh, okay.
genus, and so there would be these big ant mounds, and I used to play with the ants, and we would go in the back, behind where our house was. There was a big lot, and go back there and catch tarantulas and other things.
Oh,
And I would,
crikey.
from the time I was little, had tarantulas in various containers in the kitchen.
Oh,
And
no, no, no.
mother would give me the scissors to go around and kill the black widows, because there were black widows all over the place, and scorpions. And so I would have the job from the time I was little, going around and taking care of them. So I've always just gravitated to biology, and particularly entomology. And then as an undergraduate at Arizona State University, where I went out for high school, I went right to ASU. I was hired to work in the biological lab where they were producing the antivenom for the scorpion envenomization, which is a big problem here in
Mm.
Arizona. And so I worked there as the curator of the Scorpion Museum for 4 years as an undergrad while I was going to ASU. And through that, I got scorpions from all over the world that would come in, and I'd keep them alive, and I'd do the venom toxicity tests and classify them and all. So it just naturally evolved. And when I then went to Berkeley after graduating from ASU, I continued on working with arthropods, and primarily worked with the scorpions for my master's, comparing the circulatory system, the microanatomy and histology of the scorpion circulatory system among a couple of different species of scorpions that weren't particularly closely related. And then for my doctorate, I worked on insects, but I was working on a problem which had to do with all creatures, and that has to do with muscle and nerve interaction. And so I worked on the wax moth, Galerium melanella, and studied a particular muscle that's innervated by a single neuron, because the arthropods are a little different from mammals. Mammals have, in a single muscle bundle, there are many, many, many neurons. In an arthropod, there would be one muscle bundle innervated by one neuron. So I could ligate that. And so I did hundreds and hundreds of operations on these caterpillars that I would anesthetize with carbon dioxide and cold air.
Hmm.
And while they were anesthetized, then I would go in and make a teeny, teeny, teeny little incision with iridectomy scissors. These are the scissors that are used in eye surgery. And then I would ligate or tie off the nerve with black widow spider web, which
Oh, whoa.
has a tensile strength close to steel.
Mm.
And I'd use that as my ligature, and then put them back and pat them and bring them back to consciousness, and they would continue on in their lives. And then at certain points, I would sacrifice them and look at the muscle. This muscle particularly degenerates during metamorphosis and totally disappears. So I did that. And then as a postdoc at Case Western Reserve on my own NIH grant, I also looked at neurosecretion, the ultrastructure of neurosecretion in the brains of some of these moths. So I did a lot of work with electron microscopy, some with electrophysiology, but I did also a lot of artwork during that process, where I did a lot of drawings, etc. So, and then I ended up teaching biology and metaphysics, but I had a healing in 1968 when I finished my doctorate. I had to have some surgery, emergency surgery, and the doctor warned me, don't travel. Like, I think, well, I was going to go from Berkeley. I was going to go to my first job in Ohio, so I had to travel. So I packed up all my stuff, all my bugs, all this stuff, a whole van full of more tarantulas, more scorpions, all of these things. And I had no children at the time, even though I was married to my first husband, and I went there, but I hemorrhaged on the way,
Oh,
and I was
crikey.
in the hospital, and it was there that I prayed, even though I really had been trying to be an atheist. I tried to be a really good biologist, I just prayed to suspend my disbelief and allow, if there was such a thing as any healing energy in the universe, to allow it to heal and stop the hemorrhage, which was internal hemorrhaging. And it stopped after about 3 hours of prayer. What it seemed like I was all by myself. Nobody was teaching me what to do. But I imagine this big hand came around me and held me, and I got hot, 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 hot. And I knew the bleeding was stopped. And so I got up and the bleeding was stopped, hemorrhaging was stopped. I was able to get out and continue on my journey.
Wow. Now, what
That
did
started my metaphysical, further but metaphysical journey. Ultimately became ordained
I was going to say
in
that's
1982.
a bit of a transformative experience. Now, before I jump into that, I have one sort of trivial question, really, which is camel spiders. Do you get them where you are?
Oh, you're talking about salt pugids.
Yeah, the
They're
big
not
things,
true.
aren't they?
They're not true spiders. They're
No.
called salt pugids. I used to have them in the lab. They were wonderful to work with. They burrow under the sand. They have huge jaws. They have among size proportionately, they have the largest jaws in the animal kingdom. They don't leap. They're not venomous. They will bite. But yes, they're called salt pugids. They're not true
Yeah.
spiders.
No, I
But
knew
there
they
are
weren't true
some
spiders, but
places
I
in
didn't
the
know that
world,
name.
but there are some places in the world where there are some spiders that are really ferocious. Not so much our black widows. Black widows are kind of mild. You can be bitten, of course, but only if you can find them, kind of really, you know, uh, give them no alternative. But in Australia, some of the funnel web spiders are really quite vicious, and they can bite right through a fingernail or something.
Oh, crikey.
Australia has some really amazing venomous serpents and some amazing spiders. So,
Yes, if you want to die, go to Australia. Just walk into the
oh
bush.
no.
This is a dangerous,
Australia
dangerous
has
place.
wonderful, beautiful spiritual culture, and it's a very high energy place. It's just anywhere a person goes, you have to be cautious.
That's it.
I suppose even in Great Britain, although I don't think you have black widows.
I think we have false widows, and there are reports of black widows, but I'm not 100% on that. But we do have an adder, which is a snake. It is venomous, but it's not enough to, destroy anyone. Do you know what I mean? But hey ho.
As I understand it, the story is St. Patrick drove the snakes from Ireland.
From Ireland,
I don't,
yeah. He didn't
from
come over here
Ireland.
and do ours. Right, let's jump into that story that you mentioned about the healing. Can I ask a question? Because obviously at that point, you're in your proper logical mind, having spent loads of time doing science work, highly detailed logical work. What did you put the healing down to?
Well, what I did was I was desperate and I had no insurance. I didn't want further surgery. So I just was praying out of desperation. I had nobody to show me, pray to this or that or the other. It just seemed logical to me that I had worked a lot with the electron microscope. So I imagined that if there was some healing force in the universe, I could focus it through my hands if I held them like that, put them over my abdomen. And all my prayer was, please suspend my disbelief. So if there is something out there bigger than me, even though I didn't at the time believe it, hey, I'm open to it. I'm just help me suspend my disbelief. And that's when the big hand in my imagination came and I had the healing. And what was healed, not only the hemorrhaging, but my disbelief was healed.
Ah,
And I was able then to continue on little by little. It wasn't an overnight thing, but I spent years also studying the ministry, in addition to teaching biology and doing all of that. So I've been an ordained minister, and I still am, since 1982. And in fact, later this month, I'll be preaching at an interdenominational church that I've been preaching at, coming as a guest preacher for about 20 years. And I'm going to be teaching on miracles. I'm going to be teaching
oh,
on the and scriptural things. And I'm also a prayer chaplain at the Unity Church here in Phoenix and work with prayer. I have a prayer line of, I don't open it in general to the public, but I do have a prayer group that I've started in 1985 and continued to meet remotely even to this day. So,
Amazing.
in
And I
fact, I
know we're
just
going to
sent
get
out
into some of that. Okay,
I
so
just sent out a prayer request for all the folks in California who are suffering from
oh
the
yes,
fires.
with the fires, that's right. Yeah, a lot of that going on at the moment. Horrible stuff. The intuition side of things and medical intuition side of things I want to branch into now. So let's give some grounding for this. What is intuition from your understanding, and can we
Mhm.
quantify it?
Can we quantify it? Yeah.
Hmm.
I attempt to do so. Intuition, I believe, is natural. It's just an extension of our physical senses. I believe that we have obviously a physical body, but then also interpenetrating with that physical body is what is called the bioplasmic field. First, we have to define matter, if you don't
Okay.
mind.
Yeah, go for it.
We have to really look at this because I have worked again since the early 80s with a team of scientists in which I go into deep, deep meditation, um, altered state, and they ask me questions, scientific and technical questions. And this work continues to this day, and will even more will be. Some has been published in my book, Inner Visions of Matter and Subtle Energy, and more is to come before long in the next year or two. At any rate, in this process, a paradigm for matter and energy has come through after hundreds and hundreds of sessions working with scientists who are real, acknowledged, physicists, etc. Is that all matter, every single bit of it, winks in and out of corporeality. In other words, it's solid, and then it's pure, undifferentiated energy. And then it's solid again, which is focused energy. And then it's pure, undifferentiated energy. And this happens billions of times per second. Very, very fast. This occurs down to the very finest or most minute subdivisions of matter, which I call the graviton. Some people give other names to it. These tiniest particles of matter are the building blocks of all the other matter that we know of, the protons and the electrons and all of these things.
Hmm.
But those all are put together with these tiny, tiny bits of matter. And these tiny bits of matter pop into existence, and then they are pure energy. Well, when they are in the physical aspect, we are separate. You and I are separate. You are there where you are, and I'm here, and that's that. But when those particles are in the pure energy, it's all one. There is no locality, there's no locus, there's no physicality. We are all one. So I believe intuition is part of what could be called extended sensory awareness, which brings to the physical, which would be our physical brain, impressions that are gained from the pure energetic aspect of matter.
Okay, makes
The
sense.
trick here is access. How does a person get in touch with that information? And that's where the training comes, in my opinion, comes in, or the natural abilities. It has to do with keeping open the subconscious, keeping open the ability to access the subconscious in a very meaningful way. And I have worked on this all my life, from the time I was really little, with my work with grandmother, from the time I was a toddler, all the way up. Plus, I believe that the hardwiring was there, also the genetic aspect, which I think everyone has to some extent. And so intuition, I think, is a natural extrapolation. It's a result of the natural extension of our physical senses.
So in theory, like you mentioned, everyone is capable of this,
but
up to a point.
some have a
Yeah.
bigger foundation already built within them to access.
I think it has to do with just like any other ability, musical ability, athletic ability, mathematical ability, all of these others. We have the physical brain with all of its connections, all of its synapses, all of the neurons and everything. And that's a real thing. I mean, that is really there. If there's an injury to the physical brain, anyone would have difficulty connecting with it. But beyond that, we have what I call the mind field, which is the energetic extension, which is infinite. And so the mind field influences the physical brain as long as the physical brain has the capacity to accept the download or the readout.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I like it. It's like a
I was
bigger
just
bubble
pointing
than
out,
us sitting outside. Yeah.
I was just pointing out to you a little bit earlier about athletic ability. I understand that you've played soccer and you've
Yeah,
done all
I play
these
football.
things. You're a bit of an athlete. I'm not. What's the difference there? There's a bit of a genetic component. Um, for years, I tried to play the piano. I got to say, the word is try. I did not manage to become a proficient pianist. What's the difference? Could I, if I tried hard enough? Absolutely. If I devoted hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of time to either of those pursuits, I'm sure I could learn to play pickleball. I'm sure I could learn to play some sonata passingly well, but I could never say it really brought me the joy that doing intuition does.
Sure. You were like almost like biology has put you further along that natural path towards what you like doing, sort of thing. Yeah, I get it.
Well, it's that I believe that intuition should be grounded in logic and physical fact as well. And so that leads me to medical intuition. So in my work as an intuitive, I have done readings forever. And in fact, a girlfriend of mine who has recently passed, but many years ago, she refound me after many years of hiatus. And I was not sure at first if I should tell her that I was a professional intuitive. I didn't know what her belief system was. But finally, she would say, "Oh, what you're doing? What's your family like?" And all this, and I said, "Well, Darlene, I'm an intuitive. I work at that." She said, "I'm not surprised." She said, "You were doing readings for me in grade school." She
Well,
said,
there
"You
you
were the
go.
only person who could tell me what I had eaten the night before." For dinner and all of this. So I don't even remember, but I was doing readings from the time I was really little. And it just kind of comes naturally. And so whatever comes naturally, that you can study and you can refine. Medical intuition is based on a form of clairvoyance or remote viewing. And I can define both of those as perception at a distance. And because my background is in anatomy, physiology, histology, all the way down to ultrastructural things, it's easier for me to interpret what I see clairvoyantly. Even though sometimes I see things I don't understand, I can describe what I see, and then whoever's talking to me can maybe do more research with their physician or all. I'm not a physician. I don't diagnose or prescribe. I never wanted to be a physician. I always just wanted to work on bugs, not necessarily mammals. Um, and so I never wanted to be a physician or a nurse, but I love doing what I do. And you and I have had an opportunity you've had a personal experience with me, just so that as an example, you would have some idea of the detail that someone
Oh
such as
yes.
myself goes into.
It was highly detailed all the information, which led me on to this question, right? And you've sort of touched on it anyway because you mentioned clairvoyance. How are you getting the information? Are you being told by something, or can you see it? Well, how are you receiving?
Okay. First, you have to make the connection. So this is what I'm talking about, accessing the connection from the subconscious. So there are 4 steps that I recommend. First is relaxing, letting go to clear your mind. Then you connect with the target, whatever, in your case, it was you. And I did it by holding your photograph. I didn't analyze your photograph. I held it. I can also hold a person's handwriting or an object from them, but I don't really need a physical object. I can just focus on any bit of information that I might have. Even when I was training many years ago with my primary care physician, he would just give me numbers, patient numbers, and I knew nothing about whether they were alive, dead, man, woman, well, whatever. And then you open up to love, you literally open up to unconditional, warm feelings about this and allow the information to flow. Often it comes to me in images, but it can also come to me in thoughts. I don't hear voices. I'm not clairaudient, but I might have an impression. I might have an impression of a word or something that I'm really not that, cognizant of. And that might come up, and then, I will pass it on to the individual. Now, I do also imagine like a chart where there is a number, like a meter, where I determine percentage of openness of the different chakras and their subdivisions. And that's a quantitation. And when I've worked over the years with my scientific team, they've often asked me to describe machinery or such, and I can see an image of whatever we're looking at and turn it around in my mind. And then for an analysis of the chemistry, I will see piles of a particular chemical and can compare the size of the piles. Or I can imagine a scale where I am seeing and being weighed. It has to be like that as opposed to numbers for me, because the number part doesn't come through as much. But if I see a scale or a dial, I can read that.
Yeah, your mind is
The
obviously
same
attuned
is
to
true
that
for
imagery, isn't
that.
it?
The same is true for formulas, mathematical formulas. I can see them, but I see them as an image and I draw them, as opposed to working them out.
Yeah, it's obviously the best form for your head, your brain, to process that information.
But telepathy occurs in many instances when there's high emotionality. But in my readings, I'm not necessarily doing high emotionality, but I am opening in a way to enjoy that individual. But years ago, when I was at Berkeley, we always had a departmental exam. And after you got your master's, before you were accepted to the doctoral program, you had to go through the departmental. This was many years ago, and I don't know if they still do it. You had a board of several professors, 5 or 6 professors, and a major professor who was there, who was the lead. And they could ask you questions about anything that you had studied up until that time, and detailed questions. And more. They could ask you, Koit, we want you to go up and outline a book that you're going to write on so-and-so, or draw the life cycle of this, or whatever. And you had to do it. So I prepared close to a year for that thing. I went through and I studied all the notes of all the classes I had had. I was so uptight that when I walked in, a major professor, I still remember this. He looked at me very solemn, and he said, Ms. Randall, would you please tell me about a particular insect that I'm thinking about? And he was expecting me to ask him about the anatomy of this insect. Instead, I immediately got a picture of a cockroach in my mind. I just cleared. And so I said, well, would I find it in my kitchen? He said, well, yes. And then I took about 3 or 4 questions for me to get cockroach. They stopped the exam. they made me go out of the room, and they scolded him. Do you play this game with this person? Oh, no, they thought we were cheating. But it was the telepathy, because I had been so keyed up for this thing that I just read his mind, and I saw cockroach right away. He said, well, we never play this game. No, anyway, this is...
Yeah, you beat the
She
system
didn't
on that
ask me
one.
the questions I was expecting her to ask me about insect morphology. How many telomeres were there? It was
But oh
funny.
no.
It
Now
was
with
funny. And that was many years before I had my healing experience, that it was just clearly telepathy in its finest hour.
well, we'll have to come back to that because I will have some questions on telepathy actually, so I'll leave that for later. But I want to get into chakras in a second because whilst I
Sure.
haven't written any questions on that, I'm interested on finding out exactly what it is, where it comes from, etc. But before I go there, I want to ask this question. My brain, right, always thinks of medical intuition as if you would see like the skeleton of a person with a blue coldish background and then like a red spot in the area where there would be an issue. Is there any semblance of truth to that whatsoever? I mean, you may not see it, but do
Some
others?
some some people may see it that way. What I do is I start with the root chakra, and I always try to see if a person is grounded or not. And then I go all the way through the skeleton, all the way from the top. It's as if like an X-ray, and I am looking at the bony structures, and I'm looking at the soft structures. I go through every single vertebra. If I see something going on with one vertebra, I will imagine that bigger and bigger, trying to see what's going on. So I see very detailed images. I could draw them, and they're very detailed. But it's not like I just, all of a sudden see the whole skeleton. I'm going through it very methodically. I go through all of the organ systems, the major organ systems, in my preparations. I spend sometimes 45 minutes preparing for an hour session before I even talk to the person. And then when I'm talking to the person, I can refine my, what I'm seeing. But it's very detailed. I go down to the cellular or subcellular level in some cases, because sometimes a person has an issue which is a physiologic issue, permeability of membranes, for instance. Or, for instance, with parasites. I love parasites. I don't love parasites.
Yeah, you don't want
I
any.
I don't want any. I enjoy the study of parasitology, and that was one of the studies I did in graduate school. And of course, I took medical entomology as well, which was also fascinating. The various arthropod-borne diseases. But with parasites, they are so varied, and so I like to go in and see what I see, if I see there, and what it is and what it might be, what stage it might be in, that kind of thing. So it's not just that I went to say, hey, you got parasites in your colon. I might look to see if it's Giardia lamblia or if it's something else. And to me, the histolytica, are it helminths? Are we looking at roundworms? Are we looking at tapeworms? Are we looking at hookworms? Are we looking at something else? Because of my background and my interest.
Now, we had a session a few weeks back, and by the way, you didn't tell me about any worms I had, so that I'm winning there. So thank you. Now, let's get into the chakras. Can you explain what chakras are? Because
Okay,
I don't really know.
chakras, the word, it comes from Sanskrit. It means whirlpool.
Okay.
Essentially, what we have is a bioplasmic field, which is, remember how matter winks in and out of corporeality? Well, the most dense part is what we generally see. Others, I'm seeing you, and that's the most dense part. But your matter is winking in and out of corporeality in a zone beyond you. Okay? It's most dense really close to the body, and then it has different regions out beyond. And this matter tends to circulate just like our blood circulates, just like our lymph circulates, and our cerebral spinal fluid moves. And so as it circulates, it flows in streams, we might call them, called meridians in
Okay.
Chinese medicine. And wherever those meridians cross, and many times they cross multiple times, they cause whirlpools. So we have hundreds of tiny little whirlpools. We have whirlpools in our wrists, in the palm of our hand, soles of our feet. All our joints have whirlpools. But the 7 major whirlpools are where they cross multiple times, maybe 20, 25 times. An excellent author on this is Barbara Brennan and Rosalind Bruyere. And there are many other authors who have brought to the world very good intuitive, psychic, clairvoyant information about these. So think of them as the whole bioplasmic field is an extension of the physical body. It's physical stuff, and it's winking in and out of corporeality. But in this physical stuff, there are streams, just like there are in our physical body, and those interact with each other to form these whirlpools. I believe that there are about 12 chakras, actually. We have the 7 major ones, and then we have the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I primarily just look at the 7 major, but I'm also looking at the energy field to determine if there are places where the energy called chi, ki, mana, prana, this bioplasmic energy, whether it's squirting out or whether it's blocked or in some way impeded. And often this is where a person has a blockage in the bioplasmic field, is often where they physically have a blockage in their body. In other words, they might hold weight there. It's called armoring. And if you look at Barbara Brennan's books, Hands of Light and Light Emerging, you'll see wonderful artist renditions of just such things. In other words, places where the physical body will put on weight and armoring, where it's really the bioplasmic field and leakage. That's at the root of this. All healing takes place in the bioplasmic field first. And so energy healing and long distance prayer healing, etc., affects the bioplasmic field, which then affects the physical. And because we blink in and out, there can be repair that's instantaneous. That's why I know for a fact, as a scientist, that the many miracles described in the scriptures that Jesus did are a fact, even though people say, how could he have healed the man with the withered arm? The withered arm means the arm was all, drawn up, and he healed him in an instant because he repaired the bioenergetic field, and then at the next blink, it was totally restored. And it's absolutely believable. And it's just, the person has to understand there's more to us than what meets the physical eyes.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. So can I just ask a question? And I'm being completely honest with this one and sincere. Is science on it yet? Have we quantified all what you've said for science so that they agree as well, or not? I.e., medically.
Okay, we have to first look at the scientific method. The scientific method has limitations.
Okay.
And I know that's sacrilegious in some people's minds. We live in an age where science is writ with a capital S, and it has become a religion. Let me give you the definition of a religion versus a science. Science is based on observation. I mean, true science.
Yeah.
Based on observation, measurement, repetition, hypothesis building, and testing a hypothesis on observable phenomena that can be repeated and, proven or disproven. Religion is based on belief alone. So for a religious faith, I am going to tell you such and such is true. And if you believe it, you're a believer and this is good. If you don't believe it, you're a disbeliever. But science in many people's minds has become a religion. So What do we do if we don't have instruments that are keen enough to measure the phenomena that we're questioning? Does it mean they don't exist? No,
Yeah, yeah.
no. That's a fallacy of logic. It just means that we don't have instrumentation to measure them. So the scientific method is not going to measure the bioplasmic field until we figure out a way of correlating what is observed in the bioplasmic field with some kind of scientific measurement. And there have been a lot of studies like that. University of California, Los Angeles, and other places. Rosalind Bruyere worked a lot on this, and there have been many others. And research is being done worldwide on this. I feel that ultimately we will be able to prove the existence, scientifically prove the existence of the bioplasmic field.
Good.
Certainly we can prove we can validate thought at a distance. Olga Worrall and her husband Ambrose Worrall were healers that were in the 19th century, not 19th, but 20th century. And Olga was able to affect a cloud chamber, which is a form of scientific apparatus, which usually measures gamma rays and such. She was able to affect a cloud chamber 300 miles away through prayer. And I know that prayer works. And I know that long distance healing works. The Bankston method, for instance, William Bankston, who is a long distance healer, worked with David Crinsley, Dr. David Crinsley, a longtime friend of mine and colleague. And they did studies on mice in the laboratory showing that their prayer ability or their ability, long distance healing, which is not typical prayer, but long distance healing, was able to significantly cure implanted tumors in the mice. Okay. So there's a lot of people doing scientific exploration. Until we understand the quantum nature of matter, and that matter is subdivided into tiny, tiny, tiny little things called gravitons, which, by the way, are dark energy that's throughout the entire universe. We are going to have difficulty as scientists getting appropriate measurement tools and processes. Ultimately, I believe it will be provable. There are some people who will never believe it. So there's an old adage that science progresses one funeral at a time.
Yes,
And it just means that as those people whose minds are closed, they're set up in concrete, they will not look at it any other way until they die. There can't be further
progression. Yeah.
understanding.
Yes, I've talked about that phenomenon many times on this podcast, is that when that stubborn generation goes, things do progress. Yes.
Yes. But it's a matter of recognizing the scientific method is limited to the limits, the physical limits of observation and measurement. And if the processes that we're trying to measure cannot be measured physically by our standards because our equipment is insufficient, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The fault is in the equipment, not in, but the fault in the logic is, well, if we can't measure it, it doesn't exist. Therefore, it's not real. That's a fault in logic.
Yeah. That's like saying ghosts don't exist because we don't see them daily.
There was a time before gas was described that the wind was just explained how? The hand of God or something? How do you explain wind pressure, air pressure, if there isn't something physical there? They had to describe gas. So, it's just very, and ask somebody to explain gravity for you. But when I was in Physics 101 many years ago, the teacher had to stand up, take our book, drop it to the ground, said, "That's gravity. Now we move on." It's not explaining anything.
And that's it, yeah.
That's and even modern physicists cannot explain gravity.
Not properly.
Even
I mean, they
modern
do the old
physicists,
bowling ball, don't they, on a blanket technique now?
even modern physicists cannot explain magnetism. Whereas I understand it as the movement of quanta or gravitons from one proton to another proton to another to another, and then completing that. But until they understand the existence of gravitons and the quantum nature of matter, they're not going to be able to explain magnetism, electricity, gravity, or light. Light is explained as both a particle and a wave, but it's composed of two quanta, and therefore you have a wavelength of light, which measures how far apart those quanta are. So it's like this is the unified Einstein's unified theory is what I'm talking about. And that's what I've been studying with my whole group of scientists. Not medical intuition, but scientific and technical intuition.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for years and years and continue on. There's more to come. More will be
And I
published
like
soon.
that, especially quantum physics, because it is a proper mind bender. But if we finally do solve it, I know that solve is a wrong word to use, but if we get our heads around it properly, that would open up massive worlds of understanding, wouldn't it? True
And
understanding.
it also means that then things like extrasensory perception, extended sensory perception, all of these phenomena that we know exist
Yeah.
helps us to understand consciousness, which cannot be defined yet at this point. It's like, wow, we're still in the dark ages.
We are. A question you probably can't answer, but how far along do you think we are from the Dark Ages to that solution?
Okay. Just like with Marconi, before he was able to prove to the scientific community there was such a thing as radio,
Mm-hmm.
he had to bring a radio set in front of his peers and show them that this transmission could happen wirelessly.
Yeah.
Well, until we can prove quantitatively and measure some of these things that we're talking about, it will still be in the realm of hypothesis. But my colleagues and I are working on this, and got to say, we have a lot to say and suggested experiments, etc., that can be undertaken. So keep tuned, because better minds than mine are working on this right now, even as we speak. The writing is happening. It's going to be published before long.
I like that thing, the published before long. I was wondering, are we talking like 5 years, 10 years, 20, 50,
No.
or closer?
Because we have been working diligently on these things, myself and a team of scientists, and essentially it's being written up now.
It's
won't just
interesting,
be
isn't it?
coming from me.
Oh no, fair play. It's interesting because all what people consider woo isn't woo, then, is it? It's all fabric of nature. It is real. It's just reality. We just can't parse
It's
it
just
yet.
an understanding of the energy and matter and the interrelationship between the two. As long as we're stuck back in the old idea of Newtonian physics, where this is here and never changes, and this is here and never changes, and the two can't meet, we're stuck. We can't ask the proper questions. Science is valid as long as we understand it's limited. The scientific method is limited by definition to being able to observe and measure and repeat. But if we can't observe something and we can't measure it because our instrumentation is inadequate, that doesn't mean the scientific method is wrong. It just means that it needs to be extended a bit, and we need to refine our instrumentation. We need to ask the proper questions in the proper ways so that they can be scientifically validated. That's all it means.
Yeah.
And we're moving ahead with that. But we have to understand that matter is not the old Newtonian matter. It's not that old thing. And science has to be able to evolve.
It's weird to think, isn't it, based on what you said earlier, that I'm sat here, but I'm also not sat here.
Well, the most condensed and solid part of you is there, obviously, but there's an extension of you, which is infinite. Now, clearly, it becomes more refined in terms of more diluted physically as we move between you and I. You're in Great Britain and I'm in Arizona. But you and I are speaking through technology, and there's nothing that can deny that, where we're also connecting telepathically.
I like that.
And that cannot be denied either under the appropriate, shall we say, criteria, with the appropriate criteria.
I want to ask another question now. You know this, I'm here, but also parts of me are fading outwards towards infinity, yeah? Is that why if you walk by someone or someone walks by you, you don't necessarily feel the wind, you know that they're there? It's because our fields are crossing, is that what it is?
That's right. Or when someone is thinking of you very intently, you might think of them. How many times have you thought about something, then the phone rang, someone in the phone rang and there they were? Or you thought about them and then all of a sudden an email comes or a text comes. This is telepathy. Or you might dream of someone or some event and then it transpires. Because dreams are very much connecting us to our subconscious.
And therefore this wider field, yeah. I like it.
But what happens often with individuals, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but what happens often with individuals is they will have just an uneasy feeling. Just a sense of something's going to happen, but I don't know what it is. And that's where we're picking up on something and we need to then go into meditation. I go into meditation if something like that happens and I ask myself, is this, whatever this thing is it something going to happen to me personally? Yes, no. Is it something that's going to happen to my family members or my loved ones? Yes, no. Or is it more global? Is it more significant to the, some region or the whole planet? And you can ask these yes, no questions. And I suggest that people might discover how to use a pendulum and practice with it, or might have for themselves an image of like a traffic light where there's the red, the yellow, and the green, and just imagine red, yellow, and green in answer to their question. Red meaning absolutely no, green meaning absolutely yes, and yellow meaning maybe. You can do muscle testing where you're testing the strength of your muscles. All kinds of ways to get into the subconscious beneath our conscious thoughts, because our conscious thoughts tend to be a barrier to the subconscious. We think in words, and words are good inventions. I'm not sorry they were invented, but they cover up our thoughts. So the words are a mask, and we hide behind our words. But when we drop the words, we're telepathically more attuned.
I'm glad you mentioned that because, as part of our session we had a few weeks back, I think you mentioned to me that I would need to learn, or to at least try to learn, to meditate because my words get in the way. And I'm one of those people that when you go to sleep at night, I can't sleep because everything's just going blah, 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 at me all the time. Yeah. I think many people watching and listening to this will understand that. So, how do we get rid of that?
What you do is you don't resist it, but you say, oh, there's another thought. And then I call it Teflon brain. It's, like the Teflon coating in the cook pan. We just let it slide off. You don't try to hold on to it. You just say, oh, there's another thought. There's that thought. Drift away. Finally get to the place, and it takes practice. It takes time to essentially just get to the place where it's just empty. Here's what I suggest with people. First of all, that you prepare for your quiet time. You might turn on some music and just dance, allow yourself to move, and then sit down. and quiet yourself. Or certainly turn off the television or the radio, or don't look at your, all of your emails. Give yourself a time to quiet your mind beforehand. And there are many ways of quieting your mind. You can do it through gentle music. You could do it through art, looking at some favorite art. Or I enjoy children's books, and many of the British writers, The House in Pooh Corners and Wind in the Willows and Peter Rabbit and all of those. You can, even as adults, you can listen to things like that to help, erase from your mind some of the more caustic things that are burned in there from daytime stuff. Be patient with yourself. Start meditation for 5 minutes at a time at first. Then you might extend it to 10 minutes, 15, but don't try 3 hours at a time. And it's really important to give yourself, space. If you can clear a space around you before you do that quiet time, it'll be less evocative of things you have to do.
Less clutter.
Less clutter. Mm-hmm.
I'm guilty of that because I need to find space.
Just release your thoughts. Don't try to resist them. Say, oh, there's that thought. I'll let it go.
Yeah,
and
it's good advice.
I imagine them like soap bubbles just going off into the wind.
Well, I know from my perspective and my girlfriend's perspective, she calls it swirling, where you'll be stuck in your head and you think of a thought and you just want to go to sleep, and then you get angry at yourself because you can't fall asleep. That same thing.
And that's resistance.
Yeah.
So first, don't be angry at yourself. This is normal. This is natural. This happens to everyone. Just develop the ability to let go. I'll think about that later. I mean, here's that thought. Oh, nice thought. Not a bad thought, but later. Just let it go now. Let it go. Let it go.
Yeah, that needs to be
That's
my
why
learning.
I suggest 5 minutes at a time. And it also helps to breathe deeply. Breathe in a couple of times to really allow yourself to relax. You might tighten your fist and then just relax it and relax your entire body. Just allowing yourself to truly, truly relax.
That just reminded me of something, actually.
Give yourself as much time to practice as it needs. There's no hurry. You're an eternal being. You have forever. So 5 minutes might be enough for the next 6 months. Maybe after that you can extend it to 10 minutes or whatever. It is a matter of gentleness, not forcing. Because if you try to force something, the subconscious will resist it. The subconscious is like a little child within us. And whatever we want to do, the subconscious will be, no, no, no. It's like a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old. I want to do it my way, and it's got to be my way. And it's like, no, we just not resist. We just let it go.
Mm-mm. I know that's definitely on my learning list to do, and I do need to make some time and space to approach that thing. If I do it, am I opening myself up to gifts of the universe or benefits? What am I opening myself up to?
You're opening up yourself to everything. So what I do is surround myself with the light of the Christ consciousness. You might begin with a prayer, just not to make a wall, but see yourself as filled with light, and the light, which is chi or ki, coming up through you like a fountain. Because telepathy is everywhere. We are bathed in a sea of thought. And what we want to do is to not be overwhelmed by negativity, fear, terror, anxiety, all these things. We want to focus on those things which are truer to what we want to be and what we want to manifest. So we essentially open up to joy and peace and harmony and love.
And that's just, it's easy as saying in your mind, that's what I want.
Well, it's like any other thought. If I choose to think about an equation in calculus, or I choose to think about an opera, I can make that choice. And, it's where we put our focus, not just casually, but routinely. That's what we become.
Yeah. Yes, it is
That's the
going in.
problem.
It is going
To
in.
realize, but realize that our culture is constantly bombarding us by telling us we need things. You are deficient. You are a victim. You are suffering from hemocus. You got this malady. You've got that malady. You need to buy this. You need to order this. You really are going to be happier if you have this. Blah, 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 blah. So we're in this culture which is constantly telling us we're needy. What I'm saying is we counteract that by getting to the place where we choose to focus on, at a particular moment, maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day. We're not needy. We're overflowing. We're an artesian well of positivity and health and well-being.
I like it. I'm committing right now to starting this journey, and I find myself strangely saying that because I'm not the sort of person that would commit to this, but I'm going to.
Well, what if I were to tell you that this practice could make you the best soccer player you possibly could be?
Then I wish I'd have done it 30 years ago.
That's right. Then you would really not necessarily be committed, but you'd be intrigued by it.
Oh yes, very much so.
And that's what I'm saying, is that the process that I'm talking about, which is clearing and allowing yourself to renew, regenerate, connect with your high self, is going to regenerate you physically, emotionally, make you a better soccer player, make you a better whatever, composer or whatever.
Yeah, definitely the music side of things. I need to get slightly better at that. Um, right, thank you for that one. What is NOMI or NOMI?
NOMI is the National Organization for Medical Intuition, and the website is nomimedicalintuition.org, and it's an organization that was formed within the last few years by myself and a few other medical intuitives to set some standards
Good.
for the practice of medical intuition, defining it and then bringing it to the attention of the medical community with the object of furthering medical intuition as a practice which can be incorporated into whole body health. I suggest people go to nomimedicalintuition.org website, and you will find all kinds of information about it. Plus, there will soon be an opportunity to look at a open house that we had. It was a video open house. It was in November, and it's been edited down. And you can also go through social media, and you'll be able to see a lot more of the definition of medical intuition that way.
Excellent. Yeah,
We
so
do have a
I advise everyone
database
to do
there.
that. Yeah. Oh, good.
We have a database of medical intuitives who do adhere to our beliefs and follow our particular standards. So you will find them listed there.
Ace, thank you for that one. Now I want to get into some of the services that you offer from your website to to help further discover what it all means and what can be done. So you do life readings and purpose readings. This is one of the services, and it intrigued me the most, this one. Can you tell me about life readings and purpose readings?
What I do is I look at a person's energy field. I look at their talents, their abilities as I see them. Sometimes they're aware of them, sometimes they're not. If they're open to the idea of past lives, we can talk about past lives, but not everybody believes in it. So if they don't believe in it or not interested, we don't have to talk about that. We can talk about more their potential and how they might want to focus or refocus or consider something else. So I'm looking at the whole person.
And so the purpose of someone their life though, how do you see it? What, and how do you relay that to somebody? And do they always accept it when you pass it on?
Oh, well, not everybody believes in past lives. Not everybody believes in purpose. I personally think it's extraordinarily important. One can see, such as myself, um, what might be the choices that were made by the soul before embodying to be in that particular place with that particular set of parents, that particular set of circumstances, to either complete unfinished business from previous lifetimes or to build on skills and things that they have done in other lifetimes and to move ahead toward achieving particular goals that they might have set many other lifetimes ago. Not all of us work on every single aspect of every past life at one time. Edgar Cayce did a lot of that type of work, and I do it in a rather similar way, where I look to see, well, what might be that person working on in this lifetime that might not be all of the lessons that that person might wish to undertake. A lot of times a person has unfinished business. They might have been attempting to achieve a goal in a particular lifetime, and then they hit the ground running to come back and finish it.
Can you give me, without obviously
An, ex-
giving out any
an
information about
example,
a person, can you give me an example?
years,
Yeah.
years ago, I was doing a reading at a psychic fair. I was at this psychic fair where was at a bookstore,
Okay.
and this woman came up. She was, I would say, in her 70s, and I was doing a reading for her, and I told her that she had a grandson who had been a pilot in World War I and had gone down in a plane and died in the plane. And she looked at me and she said, well, do you want to meet him? And I said, yeah, I'd like to meet him. She then called and brought her grandson over, who was a young man in his early 20s. And I said, hello. I didn't want to put too many thoughts into his brain. But I said, how are you doing? What are you doing? He said, well, I'm training to be a pilot. And he went on about his love of pilot. And I said, yep, you died in World War I. You went down and you were in in this little, and he looked at me with this great recognition in his eyes. He was filling again the purpose of being a pilot because he had died at an early age in World War I in a plane crash.
Right, and therefore he didn't complete that journey. Was that what it was?
He didn't complete that journey. He hit the ground running. He was coming in this lifetime and going to be a pilot again.
I wonder then if the people that come in straight away and know what they want to do early in life straight
Some
away.
of them do.
Is
Some
that
of them
that?
do. And it doesn't necessarily mean time-wise, because in the astral plane, which is the plane in between incarnations, there's really no time. But it can have to do with motivation. But there have been a lot of studies through Rhine University and other places of cases of where individuals remembered past life details, in some cases very vividly, and knew who they were, where they were, even remembered some individuals in their lifetime. So I suggest people read up on some of that research because it's fascinating research on the nature of reincarnation.
I agree.
Often people will go into the astral plane and continue to learn and grow there, and then decide to come into this plane to further a more cosmic goal, like helping to heal the world or helping to be of service to people.
Do you know what your purpose is?
Oh, yeah. From the time I was little, I could remember ancient lifetimes in Egypt and elsewhere where I was doing much of the same thing that I'm doing now. And I always knew I wanted to be a scientist priestess,
Is that
merging the two.
is that just to help people? Is that the ultimate aim?
To help people, but also to help the understanding of the universe to move it ahead.
Can you read yourself then in terms of like past lives, or do you need a
Yeah,
third party to read yourself?
I've always been aware since I was little. But most of the people in none of my immediate parents or grandparents were very interested in past lives. My grandmother was very psychic. Um, my parents didn't seem to be, they had awareness, but they weren't against it. They just weren't that into it. None of them seemed to be really into past lives. But from the time I was little, I totally believed in them because I could remember from the time I was little. And
Whoa.
so I just like, yeah. And so my parents had different belief systems. My grandparents were Catholic. My mother was a Christian Scientist. My father was a Methodist. So they said, they stood back and said, just let her decide for herself. So from the time I was in grade school, I kept a file on comparative religions, and I had them take me to all the different denominations. And in Arizona, we have a huge number of churches. I mean, you get hundreds of denominations. And so that's one of the beauties of the United States is we got freedom of religion. And so they would take me here, there, the other place. And one of the first things I would ask as a small child is, do you believe in reincarnation? If they didn't, I'd say, hey, take me to the door because
Being that one off, yeah.
this is not for me. We'll
Yeah,
just click
exactly.
this one off.
So
But I'm in unity now, and unity is totally,
open. Yeah.
accepting of everything.
So when you look at your own past lives, right?
Mhm.
How do you discern, right? That's life A, this is life B, this is life C. Is it just a
Because
knowing?
you see yourself in that, or sometimes you might just see a snippet of something, like an image. One of the people in my lifetime, in this lifetime, I saw her as a grandchild of myself, and I saw us in a garden, many, 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 years ago. In other lifetimes. But when I was a child, I could remember Egypt, and I could remember this. And then when I had a it was called rebirthing. If you remember when the rebirthing thing was back in the 90s, a lot of people were into that. And so a dear friend of mine was guiding me through rebirthing. Well, I couldn't stay in this life. I went immediately back to when I was being embalmed and in Egypt, and I could see the place where I was, where my mummy still is. I could see this little chamber. It wasn't the grand thing, it was a little chamber. And then I went up through the layers, and I could see it was under present day Cairo. And I could almost read the street signs, but I couldn't quite. And I was able to walk through the door, my my spirit self, and I then felt more integrated because part of my energy body had been stuck there all those many years in that little chamber. So,
What else have you seen
um,
then, other than Egypt?
I've seen all kinds. I don't want to go into great detail with it, but I have seen many, many lifetimes. This
Wow.
is something that a lot of people do. When people need to listen to children when they're tiny, because often children will talk about their past lives. It's just in our particular culture, in the Western world, Western Christian world, often people just discount it and they don't pay attention to it. But if you really listen to toddlers, especially when they're starting to talk, they will often talk about where they were before.
I
And
know.
sometimes I suggest to people before they have babies, both the mother and the father, to pay attention to their dreams, because often they will dream about the previous life of the child that is coming.
Yes, I've spoken to somebody before on this reincarnation topic, and he's basically said exactly what you've said. So, there is weight to it, seemingly, and I believe in it
However,
anyway. So,
I think a person needs to be cautious about having memories implanted in their mind by somebody who might not be as skilled as they could be. I think that allowing memories to come up spontaneously in dreams or however they do is the safest thing to do.
I
Because
agree
we
on that
weren't
one.
all Cleopatra and we weren't all grand figures. Most of the lives that we lived were very ordinary and many of them very brief.
Certainly
Very
not to
brief.
today's longevity, is it? Put it that way.
No, 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 very brief. And um, some of them just very, very ordinary.
Yeah, which is what most people actually aim for, isn't it? I suppose. A nice, ordinary, peaceful life. That's what I aim for, anyway.
Yeah, but many times a person will think, well, gosh, I have to have been, at least a princess or somebody remarkable or whatever. And then they end up with a memory that somebody else either validates for them or sees them. And that's all grand, but it may not be true.
Well, it's unlikely, isn't it? Most of the people I know are just ordinary people going about their days and lives.
But
Not
you
many
think
people
about
are
all the
princesses.
but you think of all the people who have lived in the past
Mm.
on this planet and elsewhere. And by the way, some souls have had incarnations on other planets and then come here. And that's why some people feel they don't belong here.
That's another big topic. I think we'll leave that towards the end. If
Some,
we've got time, I want to break into
yeah,
that
yeah,
one.
yeah. Just some people feel that they, came from another star system.
Yeah, highly
They very
intriguing.
well may have. Because think about it logically. That was one of the first questions that came up to me when I was thinking logically about the whole topic.
Hmm.
And I brought it up at a Casey conference many years ago. Because how come there are more people living now than have ever lived before? And if this is the case, and if there's reincarnation, how can that be? Well, then the answer was some of them incarnated on other planets. And Casey said that.
And we've just offset more here at the moment because we need them for the bodies.
Or it just is a matter of accruing, you reproduce
Mm.
enough, you get enough rabbits going, and they get more.
Them damn rabbits. They never stop, do they? Right, let's have a look at project readings. What is project readings?
Project readings, again, is when an individual might want to invent something, or maybe they want to start a business, or maybe they want to write a book. I'm not a business consultant. I'm not a financial consultant. Don't ask me financial questions, because I will not answer. But a lot of times a person wants a guidance about a particular thing they're writing or a particular thing they're creating or play or maybe something they're inventing, and I can look at it and look to see this needs to be tweaked or that needs to be tweaked, that kind of thing.
Cool. You also say overcoming blocks to creativity. So,
Mhm,
what are the
mhm.
blocks that we put in our own way, and why do we do that?
Oh, they can be myriad, many of them. A lot of times they're fear-based, fear of criticism. And unfortunately, a lot of those blocks get started in early childhood. When at some point, maybe first or second or third grade, some teacher discouraged a person when they were drawing or painting and essentially maybe cruelly said, or maybe a sibling cruelly said that they didn't have any talent. And so they
Mm.
never really continued on. People are afraid of creativity, I have found. Years ago, I was teaching fine art. Among the various things I was teaching, I taught scientific and technical illustration and fine art, painting, drawing, all of this. And so I would create my classes. They were non-credit classes at a local community college, and I would name them and write them and everything. So I wrote Creativity 101. Nobody signed up for it.
Terrible.
So I took the same class and I called it Art for the Absolute Beginner, and they all signed up for it. I said, this is the class for you if you can't draw a straight line with a ruler. This is the class for you. And they just, because everybody used to say, I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. I can't. So I had to get over that and start from the very beginning of just having them make all kinds of doodles and marks like that on a piece of paper and then exchange pieces of paper and look to see what they could see. Maybe this looks like a dog or this looks like a flower, this, in somebody else's doodles. And then for painting, I just had them take acrylic paints, usually on a big empty canvas, and just the same color on it all over, and then take and throw paint on it and allow it to dribble and then get their images from it. I had to
So,
get over fear.
Yeah.
and over these deep beliefs that they couldn't do it.
So do you think the majority of blocks are self-imposed, or at least pushed onto us by others, rather than blocks from past lives and stuff?
Well, it can be both. It can be both, but whether they are from this life or another life, they can be moved through. One can move through it. And like I say, not everyone is going to be Picasso, or not everyone is going to be Leonardo, but you can enjoy, you can come to experience, you can have a good time. You don't want to close off that. Like even I would be open to pickleball or to ping pong or to, that kind of thing.
Good. I have a
Even though long
question.
jump is probably something I
Yeah,
will not ever do correctly.
you're never going to be doing that one. I have a question for you regarding the nature of creativity. I'm going to try and read this verbatim. Is the creativity or ideas or whatever we want to call it, is it all just answers or realities that already exist that we are accessing? Or is it generated from us?
I think it can be both, because individuals can definitely take a particular precept and then they can add something new to it. But time is really coexistent. So, for instance, in my scientific and technical work, people will ask me, Kay, how do we do so and so? And I try to get it in a time frame within 20 years or so from the present, so that the materials involved in it don't have to be invented. And then I will see it. So a lot of times the creative project is already in existence at some point in the future, and you just open up to it. However, there's such strong telepathy that creativity can often be, shall we say, contagious. And I can remember years ago, I was working on a particular project in biology, and there was somebody upstairs in the same building working on a similar project, but he had a totally different animal. I was working on insects, he was working on vertebrates. And he accused me of somehow stealing his ideas. And I was like, I don't even know you, sir. And I don't know nothing about it. But telepathically, similar questions were being asked. That's why there's nothing as strong as the time for something. In other words, everything gets invented in its time. And there's a real unfoldment going on now in human understanding and technology. We're just exploding because one thing leads to another, to another, to another.
But that's interesting. So what you're getting at is that all these inventions and things actually exist because they're future scenarios, future creativity endeavor, shall we call it? And it will never come to us until the right time for humanity. So then it's unfolding to then be here at the right time. Is that what it is?
Well, they might come, but they can't come into fruition. Like Leonardo da Vinci drew a lot of sketches for things that could not be built.
Like helicopters, as an example.
The helicopters,
Yeah.
because the materials hadn't been invented yet.
I see. So the ideas can come, but we might not be ready. Yeah.
Yeah, he was thinking of building them out of wood.
Yes.
And so I've often seen things when I'm working with my scientific colleagues, and I'll see it, I'll describe it, I'll draw it, but then they have to start reverse engineering it and inventing things to get up to the place where they can do it.
That must be mind-blowing for you.
They must have to invent the materials and invent the process, or, because it hasn't quite materialized yet. But you've heard the old adage, there's nothing as powerful as a thought that's time has come. And that's because it's really, really, really everything needed to accomplish that particular thought or object or whatever is at hand. and it can come into existence.
Like there is a universal purpose.
Well, not just purpose, but the timing. All the little pieces and the widgets and all the parts of it are there so that it can be brought together.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is it's suggesting that if it's unfolding to a plan. So the creativity coming down here to Leonardo da Vinci, you could almost say is irrelevant because it's not ready. Could have been another guy 100 years later, it's not ready, but now it's coming down. This purpose, this plan is going to happen.
It is going to happen if
Hmm.
someone pursues it. It definitely will happen because
Yeah.
now the materials needed to bring it into existence are there.
Yeah.
We don't have to build it out of wood.
Yeah.
We build it out of, but somebody had to invent the materials before we could get it in place.
And then you can parse that backwards and say, so that material that was also gathered from somewhere, that invention. So it's all linked,
That's right.
obviously, to come to there. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting and mind blowing. Now I'm going to take a sideways journey with you now because I know you've also had some interaction with MUFON because you used to be a field
yes.
investigator.
Yes, I was first a field investigator with APRO, which was an organization that existed before MUFON. So in 1970, I became a field investigator. I still have my card
Oh, cool.
with my picture. I never did get many cases, but it was something that was fascinating. I've been fascinated with otherworldly visitation and stuff since I was ever, all my life. And I've never been frightened of it. I don't think I've been abducted. I don't, but telepathically, there's some connection. And I have just always believed as a biologist, and just think about it, Koit, as a biologist, if you take a spade, or we would call it a shovel, and you go to any place on the earth and you turn over a shovelful or a spadeful of soil, you're going to find microorganisms in it. You're going to find life forms in it.
Mm-hmm.
Even the patina that's on the rocks in the desert, that desert patina, that kind of a dark color, that has microbes in it. Can you imagine then the logic of saying all these stars, all of these exoplanets are devoid of life, and our planet is the only one with life? Does that make sense? To me, it makes absolutely no sense, because we know as biologists that there isn't a deep, deep place in the ocean or a place at the highest mountains. That there are even worms that exist in ice in the glaciers.
I know. It's mind blowing that people think that closed-mindedly.
There has to be life elsewhere.
Yes, of course.
And because life has evolved here on Earth, to us, whether you want to call us intelligent or not, we're getting
somewhat past, yeah.
We're somewhat there. To me, as a biologist, I have to say it's illogical to imagine that it does not exist elsewhere. Do I also think that it's logical that we are the alpha, that we are the pinnacle? No, I don't think so.
What do you think?
By the laws of averages, I don't think we are.
No, and I think on exactly the same wavelength there as you in regards to this. It's dumb to think otherwise. What do you believe then to be true about UFOs and aliens as pertains to this planet?
Okay, but that's what brings us back to the topic of being a field investigator. I am a scientist, so field investigators. Now, I was a field investigator for MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, between like 2012 and maybe 2016. Now it's really, really good, but I get so busy with my other work, I don't have time for it. We have the Field Investigator Boot Camp here in Arizona. People come from all over to study. It's a scientific endeavor. The effort of MUFON is to scientifically investigate the unknown aerial phenomenon. Scientifically, it's not a religion. And it is a matter of, if there is something there, let's scientifically investigate it. So I recommend anybody who is interested in this, look up a local MUFON chapter, wherever you live, and see if you can get some training, because you'll learn how to do forensics, how to gather, any kind of clues at a particular site, how to interrogate witnesses, how to make good field notes, how to check on photographs, or where to go, just check on photographs and videos, and then how to follow all kinds of lines of information. Most of the cases that are reported to MUFON and elsewhere are natural phenomena or unrecognized or explainable things. Meteor showers, maybe it's a satellite that's fallen to the earth and they've seen lights. Could be all kinds of things. But there's a small percentage, and MUFON follows through with those cases, which are unexplainable. And I believe we're going to have disclosure from our government, probably within, I can't tell you how many years. Hopefully it'll be soon, within my lifetime. I think it's creeping closer and closer. It's just, remember that old issue about the one funeral at a time?
Yes.
We have the same thing here. Only thing, know that if, I'm not saying it's true. But if there is some profit motive here in keeping it from the general public in some way that goes against disclosure, either a profit motive or some kind of religious orientation that might say that these things, whatever they are not actual things, but they might be demonic or whatever. So those beliefs have to live out their life.
Yeah, and then when they pass, we'll finally get it.
Before they can be complete acceptance.
Yeah, I agree. And I also echo exactly what you said, which is it needs to be within our lifetime, because I'm so intrigued by the question. So. I want to see it.
I, as far as I'm concerned, disclosure has already happened.
Oh yeah, we're in the midst of it.
But there are some places where I could walk into a crowd, and if I stood up and actually spoke my truth to them, I would be escorted out, and probably very promptly. So until that openness occurs and people recognize that this is a scientifically validatable truth, not going to happen.
Indeed. Now, obviously, being a field investigator, you said you didn't have that many cases, but was there one that stuck out to you as being your favorite?
I had quite a few cases. There were only 3 field investigators for our Phoenix team at that time. Now there are 20 some odd. We had a lot of cases, but the one that really made me stand up and take notice and want to become a field investigator was through another scientist friend of mine. Years ago, I worked at the Desert Botanical Gardens, and a friend of mine, who I will not mention because I haven't asked her permission to tell you this, was another scientist at that garden, a very well-known scientist, PhD level, and she had been out observing pollinators in a particular desert plant with 2 other scientists. And they would have to be there all night long, looking at the moths, looking at the bats, looking at whatever was coming to the flowers, and writing down their notes and taking photographs and things and documenting that. Well, they were way out in the desert and placed near the Bradshaw Mountains. And they saw a UFO come down, a craft hover over the Bradshaw Mountains in the distance for about 15 minutes. A light came out from that down into the ground. It stayed there, the craft and the light, for 10, 15 minutes. They watched it. The light went back up. The craft turned into a ball of blue light and took off. She was so excited. The next day she came back from that, and she called the police and reported, and some pilot had seen it as well. And she came bursting into the lab. I remember because I was looking at insects and she was, thinking, saw UFO, saw UFO. She had never seen one before. And that, years later, when I became a field investigator, I interviewed her, and that became one of the historical cases. It was a scientist, more than one scientist, observing for a long period of time. It wasn't just a streak in the sky. It was a craft and a light, and then the craft turned into a ball of light and disappeared.
Incredible. Have you had any sightings yourself?
Um, None that I would say I've wanted to. I've really tried to, but no, other than intuitively, just in with the extended sensory perception. Well, with the exception, I've seen a couple of lights in between myself and a mountain across the street from where I live. But again, those could be explained away. I don't have anything, tangible. Not
Sure.
like a lot of the people that I know, or some of the famous cases, the Walton case and things like that. I mean, Travis Walton and
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
I have met many, many people, however, and interviewed many people. But I've also interviewed some people who were mistaken. And there's a community not far from us. And there was a case that was reported. 5 people were credible witnesses said they saw a craft that landed and they saw these little aliens. And so I was working with a partner who was our top UFO investigator, MUFON investigator at the time, a former policeman, wonderful, very strong person. And he went up to that community and talked to people and discovered that they'd had an all-night celebration that night with Chinese lanterns. And that what these people had seen was a Chinese lantern, which is kind of a ball thing with a little flame in it, come down. It had fallen on the ground, and people had gone to it to think. That's what these people swore they saw.
Yeah,
And
it counts for quite a lot of those,
he
doesn't it?
interviewed them, and I interviewed them, and we were able to clear up the case and solve it because, it was clear these were Chinese lanterns that were being, put over the community that night.
If you had to put your money, not that I'm saying advocating gambling, but if you had to put your money on where they're coming from, are they under the ocean, underground, or off planet, or interdimensional?
All kinds of things. There's more. I think there are more than one species involved. There's species group. When I talk about species groups, I talk about the Lindalian system of, we talk about families and genus and
Oh,
species.
okay, yeah, yeah.
I think there are about 4 or 5 at the generic level species groups. And most of the things that come probably are probes. They're probably what we would call cyborgs. So they are like the Greys. They're not actual complete creatures. They are a melding of DNA and machinery way beyond our capacity. Because why would you, as a culture, waste one of your valuable individuals? You would send probes out like we're doing now.
Yeah, no, I agree on that one as well. So you think that's
And
predominantly what it is,
so
not biological?
I think that I think they're coming from Zeta Reticula. I think the Pleiades. I think there are others. There are many thousands of exoplanets now. So not all of them are beneficial. Not all of them are malevolent. Just like not all people are malevolent. And so we have to be careful, especially with the CE5 kind of protocols, which is calling things in. I wouldn't do that. I'd be careful about that because you don't know what you're dealing with here.
No, I agree on that one as well. Let's touch then on what we talked about earlier, which is the reincarnation of souls into bodies here, and then alien souls, essentially, for want of a better phrase, coming in. That is suggesting
It
100%
wouldn't be called
aliens
an
exist.
alien soul. And all souls are souls.
Just
It
soul,
would be choosing a particular vehicle, physical vehicle that might be on another planet or might be here. I don't necessarily believe in transmigration of souls, which is a Hindu belief that if you live a life in which maybe you are not up to par or doing what you should be doing, that you might come the next life as another animal form. I think animals have souls, but I don't necessarily think that it's a punishment for anything. I like to believe my kitty cat has her own kitty cat soul, but this is a true kitty cat soul, and it's not somebody being, punished by being my kitty cat. Got to tell you, it's a good life, my kitty cat.
I
That's a
bet,
good
yeah.
life.
Doesn't have to work
So,
for a living.
So a person, a soul, not a person, but a soul might incarnate in another, to a being in another planet, as well as a being in this planet. And some carry with them a belief or a feeling that when they're here, they don't really belong. It's like they don't feel like they're in the right place.
Does that also
Not
mean,
all.
conversely, by the way, that we, human, I'm going to say human, previously human incarnated souls, are on extraterrestrial planets as well?
Very likely.
And then they also wouldn't feel like they're at home.
Yeah. I see no reason why not.
Have you got any past life examples of where people say, oh, I was an alien on X planet?
I don't have any specific ones I could tell you, but I've talked to many, many, many people who say that they felt from birth almost they don't believe in that family. Well, I don't seem to belong to this particular family group. I don't even relate that much to the earth. I relate more to the Pleiades or relate more to another planet, and that's common.
When the reincarnation phenomenon happens, technically we shouldn't remember anything. I presume that's the plan.
Not necessarily.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I think most people do remember to some extent, and it
But
comes
why?
out
Why?
in ways. Well, because just like what you remember, do you remember what you did when you were 5 years old? I mean, it's like memory is memory. Um, but it comes out in different things. Like people will say, "Oh, I love to decorate my home in whatever, Victorian or in this, that, or the other thing." Or I love to read these stories, these novels that were set in a particular time period, The Great Gatsby or something. Or I gravitate to this, or well, I found it very easy to learn French, or I found it very easy to learn Chinese, or this is people do it all the time. They just might not connect it to a past life consciously. Often people will meet people that they feel they've known before, that they feel, I've known this person forever. Sometimes it's just their personality that is similar to their personality patterns that they've met. But sometimes they've actually had past lives with them.
Well, I could give you a personal story now, and I've probably said this before on my podcast, but I'm going to say it again. When I met my girlfriend, she sent me a photo of her because we met online, modern tech and all that. And when I saw the photo, I knew her, even though I didn't know her. I've never seen her before in my life, but I knew her. It's a weird thing to describe, but that is that, I presume.
When I met my first husband for the first time, it was in the chess club. I was 14 and he was 19. And he was in the chess club and he was a senior in high school and I was a freshman. And I walked in the door. I saw him and I saw him in the clothes of another era. He saw me and he saw me in the clothes of another era. And it was like we knew each other.
It's weird, isn't it? But it's also fascinating.
It's fascinating. Yeah. And I gradually remembered what had happened in that lifetime and how we had been separated. We'd been married and separated, and I had longed for him for years, and then finally we got back in this lifetime. So
it's so endlessly fascinating, this sort of stuff, isn't it? We are going to leave it behind for a second as we enter the Koit zone. Koit zone! Now, Kay, in the Koit zone, I'm going to ask you just generic questions about you. So ask best you can. Answer best you can, I should say. Well, so let's start with a nice easy one. What is your favourite movie, if you have one?
Oh, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Lovely movie, that one. I heard that Steven Spielberg's working on a new one.
Favorite. Well, maybe he is, but that one was factually based. And it really, I've watched it many times. I love it.
Yeah, me too. It's a very, very good film. Good choice. Um, I think you answered this earlier, but can you sing or dance?
Oh, I used to sing. I never danced that well, but I used to do some ballroom dancing. And I've gotten older, and so my voice has gotten weaker. But I used to sing. I sang solos and was often chosen to sing solos when I was in school and such.
Awesome. Do you have any superstitions that you follow?
Oh, absolutely. I
Oh.
was raised in a family, remember my Irish great grandmother?
Hmm.
A lot of superstitions. We had superstitions for everything. You should never start a project on Friday. You should never give a sharp object to a friend or cut your friendship. Um, on and on. Spill salt, you got to throw some over your left shoulder. If you want something to happen, you knock on wood. I mean, I know there's superstitions, but I was raised by my grandmother who had all these superstitions, many of them straight from Ireland, probably.
It begs the question: how do you get anything done? Because you're constantly doing like throwing shoulders and
That's
stuff in
right.
it.
I know. I know. I know.
Do you still have any childhood items or toys?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
I
awesome.
have the soapbox that my first boyfriend made for me in grade school. My first boyfriend was Jewish,
Hmm.
and he made me a Christmas present. It was the first Christmas present he ever made anybody. It's a box that says soap on one side and has my maiden name on the other engraved on it and a little top to it because he said I was always getting on the soapbox and talking about causes and talking about things. So he gave me the soapbox. So I still have the soapbox that he made for me in grade school.
And can I ask you a question? Do you use it for storing soap?
No, I use it. It's underneath a particular piece of furniture so I can see it. I can always see it because I'm still on the soapbox. He's he's probably, I don't even know if he's still alive, made his transition. I don't know. I haven't talked to him in 70 years probably.
Wow.
But I remember him walking up the driveway of my home here in Phoenix. He had this beautiful gift, all beautifully wrapped in all these bows. And he was so proud of himself. He'd actually created this Christmas present for me and wrapped it. It was the first Christmas present he'd ever given because he was Jewish.
A valuable, valuable item to behold. So fair play. Fair play. What's the best thing you've ever found?
Found?
Yeah.
You mean finding a person or finding an idea or finding,
Well, that's a very good point. It could be anything that you want. I mean, I was going with an item, but you can go with a thought, you can go with a person, you can go with a.
gosh, I can't even think at this moment of things that I have found. So I'll have to pass on that because I really can't because I've looked for so many things for so many people. I just think peace of mind.
Oh, there you
I
go.
think when I had that healing, it was it was a real revelation to me. I was not expecting anything. I just, like I said, suspended my disbelief. And so when I found that truly there was something bigger than myself, really, truly, that was the revelation that I have always, it's always brought me joy because it's like, yes,
Well, there
it
you go then.
truly,
You
I
found
found
your
peace of
path from
mind through
that.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, found peace of mind from that because the belief system that I had been taught, they tried to drill into me as a biologist was that what you see is what you get. That this was all there was, and there was nothing more to it. And I found that very dismal.
Mm.
Whereas in earlier life, I had attended all these churches and everything, but I'd never really had what we would call the insightful moment. It was more in my head. And then I turned away from that because it wasn't logical. And then this experience happened to me. It was like, goodness, there really is something bigger than me. There really is something.
There is something bigger than all of us. I love that as well. Um, you might not be able to answer this one, but does anything frighten you?
Does anything frighten me?
Yeah.
Um, Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
I don't like a lot of gore and a lot of um, cruelty. And so whenever there are things like these images of the wildfires in California, that would have been terrifying to me to
Mm.
be near that. The feeling of being at in a place consciously or physically where, you can't prevent something and it's very dangerous. Yes, absolutely. So yes, so of course I've got common sense, and I think fear is not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's there for a reason.
And it can help us. I try not to dwell in fear. And to me, the antidote for fear is knowledge. So trying to learn as much as I can about things. But still, there's something like that wall of flames that came through the Los Angeles area and surrounding areas last night. I mean, that was terrifying for anybody.
Oh, hell yeah. Proper hell on earth, that one. I know the answer to this one, what you're going to say already, but I'm going to ask the question. What is the best animal?
What is the best animal? There
Yeah.
is no one best animal.
I thought you were going to say
Ev-
cats.
no, every animal, every little critter has its beauty. That's why when I began to study spiders, I studied spiders because, they made me feel a little squeamish sometimes. But the more I got to look at them and see how beautiful they were and come to appreciate the absolute gorgeousness of how they're put together, I have to realize it's all absolutely magnificent. Even the scorpions that I spent so much time studying, when you look at them, been around for 350 million years, and they are absolutely beautifully constructed. Even cockroaches, which we tend to want to exterminate, are beautifully constructed. So um, every single one. Now, do I want a pet cockroach? No. Do I want to have scorpions living in my home, even though I've had hundreds in this house? I've had to dismiss them, get rid of them. Um, no, kitty cats, dogs, kitty cats, horses, hamsters, those things are great. Although I've had pet tarantulas, and one of the things that I found was one day I was in the lab. It was on my birthday many years ago. I was working for the state of Arizona as an entomologist. Somebody called up, ding-a-ling-ling. I've had a tarantula I bought at a pet shop. She laid eggs. And now we've got baby tarantulas. So we went over, my husband and I, my second husband and I, who is also an entomologist, we went over and we scooped up as many of the baby tarantulas, teeny, teeny, teeny little babies as we could. We adopted out as many as we could to friends, and I raised over 60 baby tarantulas to a certain point, which took quite a few years. Had to grow fruit flies for them, keep them in separate little vials and feed them the fruit flies. So they're magnificent creatures. Everything is magnificent.
I agree they are magnificent, but spiders, they're the one thing that would probably frighten me a bit too much when they're like scurrying at you. I don't like that.
And even the parasites. Remember, I talked about Giardia lamblia. That's
Hmm.
a protozoan parasite that you really don't want to have. But years ago, when I was taking parasitology, I was also doing arts and craft always, and so I stenciled Giardia lamblia, which has kind of a distinctive look to it, on my on the mats that I would use under the food. The food mats, the stencils of Giardia lamblia, because it's a beautiful creature when you look at it in the abstract.
I bet that worried a few people when they saw those mats if they knew what it was.
Most people just didn't
No, they
understand.
wouldn't
Even
know
if
it.
you
No.
told them, they didn't get it.
Have you, Kay, ever broken a bone?
Only one. I chipped one toe very slightly. I was going to my first, it was in graduate school, and they had wanted to throw the most difficult courses at me because my major professor didn't approve of married women in graduate school. So I was a freshman at Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley. He threw the advanced um, seminar at me, not a pro seminar, but advanced one. I had to give a 3-hour presentation, and I was going to give it on scorpions because I knew more about scorpions than any of the rest of them did. And I was walking to the library, and I walked really fast, and I stumbled and fell in the ditch and pulled this little bit off the bone, off my toe, and continued and gave the seminar, hobbled up. He must have thought I was pretending or something. I hobbled up, gave my first hour and a half of the seminar on scorpions, and then went to the infirmary because at Berkeley we had an infirmary. I went there and they bandaged it up and it was broken. And then when I saw that professor who led the seminar the next day or so, how are you, ma'am? And I said, well, I broke my toe. He said, oh, you mean you actually had a broken toe last night? I said, yeah, I actually had a broken toe. And so the next week I continued my next hour and a half. I knew more about scorpions after having been curator of Scorpion Museum with scorpions from all over the world than any of the professors did.
I bet you
So
did.
they
Ironically,
loved that.
is your star sign Scorpio?
My ascendant is, my sun is in Cancer, my ascendant is Scorpio.
There you go. It's in there somewhere, isn't it? Close to you, that one.
And my moon is Capricorn. So I've got the sun, moon, and opposition.
Quality. What is the best way to cook a potato?
Well, I don't actually eat potatoes. I don't tolerate them very well. However, I think either in a microwave or the oven, just avoiding frying. So steamed or baked, I think is the best.
Nice jacket
But
potato.
I don't eat potatoes. I don't eat dairy products. I don't eat beef.
Wow.
I'm not a total vegetarian, but I eat very little meat, mostly vegetables. And I love sardines. I love sardines and olive oil.
Just throw
they're
that
very
in at
good
us,
for
why
you.
don't you?
They're very good for you. Fish
Okay.
is very good for you in
Oh, it
general.
is very much so. I love.
Steamed, but not fish and chips like you guys make, but steamed fish.
Yeah, I have it without the crumbs and that, just plain fillet, you know.
Mm-hmm.
A nice white fish, though. I don't want a pink fish. I don't like that stuff.
I like salmon.
Yeah, well, that's the sort
Steamed.
of fish I wouldn't touch.
Oh, you should have it in my house. With it steamed, it's delicious.
Do you know what? I've never liked it. It always tastes too strong and weird for me, pink fish.
No,
But
it
hey
would
ho.
not taste strong at all. It's
Oh,
very
okay.
mild when it's steamed.
Oh.
You don't even have to put any batter on it or anything. It's just very, because in Arizona you don't have a lot of fish. So I was not raised in a household where we had a lot of fish because,
Yeah, desert and all that.
you're
Yeah.
kind of far from the ocean and but I love salmon and steamed.
Quality. Which leads us to the last Koit Zone question, which is, if technology was invented that allowed you to get younger to what you consider your prime would be, would you take that path?
I consider my prime is now
Awesome. I like that.
because I've never been as wise as I am now. I used to know a lot more things that I could recall. See, intelligence, we have the intelligence, which is the intelligence that has to do with memorizing things and calling up great long lists of things and all of that. That fades after about 25 years of age. It keeps getting less and less. We can still memorize things, and I still do. But at my age, which is quite advanced, the wisdom grows. So I've never been wiser than I am now. And to me, that's it's wonderful. I would not go back. I wouldn't trade. I wouldn't go back to my 20s. I would not go back to my 40s. I would not go back to my childhood. I love it now where I am, and I'm feeling better than I've ever felt and continue to be so.
Well, I'm glad I asked you that question. It was obviously meant for you because I actually put in parentheses, I'm not sure if you would keep your current mind, and that would have been the thing for me as well. I wouldn't choose to go back if I had my younger mind. So well played to you.
Well, because I just didn't, I had a lot of facts and I could tell you all kinds of stuff, like I had almost a photographic memory, but I didn't have the wisdom that I have now. And that puts it all together. You
I
know,
agree.
it gives a perspective on it.
Yeah, it's how you view the world.
But I
And
still
I love
learn
that.
things. I'm constantly learning things, constantly taking classes, constantly growing and learning and memorizing things and all of that. Um, but it's not going to be the brain that I had at 25.
Yeah, and I like my brain now, so I understand the reason why you answered that question that way. Well played to you. That is the end of the Koit zone, which leaves us two final questions before we wrap up. The first of which is, what else do you like to do in your downtime? Any activities or guilty pleasures?
Oh, I crochet. I crochet, and I also have done knitting. My mother was a professional knitter,
Ooh,
but I crochet and I've crocheted huge things. I'm also a spinner. And the first time I ever sat at my spinning wheel, I knew I'd done it many times before. And I spin with a supported spindle in the ancient way with the little supported called a
yeah.
kakli. I have a kind of cotton spinner that Mahatma Gandhi used. In fact, I've grown my own cotton in my own yard here in Phoenix, and then completely processed it all the way through. I've processed lamb's wool all the way through. Just buying. I never had my own sheep because I've always wanted to, but I never had them. But I'm a weaver, not a weaver, but a spinner and a crocheter, and I have huge afghans that I've done, and I've done needlepoint, so all kinds of things, as well as a painter. I've painted, done in many, many different media. Writer, written poetry all my life, and of course, hang out with my grandchildren and great grandchildren, and my
Awesome.
husband, of course.
Yeah, oh yeah, don't forget him. You got to be
And
best
the great
pleased.
grandchildren keep coming. You're getting more and more all the time.
And that leads us to the last question, which is, what are you currently working on? Do you have a project on the go or anything?
Oh, several. My goodness. Aside from NOMI, National Organization for Medical Intuition, where I'm the vice president, and until very recently the secretary, now I'm just the vice president. Um, Continuing to work with my scientific colleagues, and the books will soon be coming out. Continuing on with clients. I see clients all the time, like this afternoon, talk to another client. Working with my son and with the grandchildren and great grandchildren, and I'm doing a big Afghan now called the Happy Days. It's from Annie's, uh, which is a craft supply place, and
Okay.
it's called the Happy Days Granny Afghan, but it's all different, not just the typical granny squares, but all these different things. Um, I constantly, and of course, I'm a prayer chaplain at church. Tonight, I'll be there supporting in our meditation at Unity. I'm a minister. I'll be preaching on the 26th at another church, and I have a whole bunch of congregants that I pray with, as well as my prayer group, and I'll be sending out more prayer requests today for all those people in California affected by the fires,
Mm.
and updating the prayer request list for, who are we praying for. I just got word of one of my congregants that I've been praying for, who was going to have a surgery this last week. In fact, a couple of days ago, and for supposedly a heart blockage. I didn't know what her surgery was about, but I've been praying with her and for her. She was supposedly had a major blood vessel that was 55 to 60% occluded by 4 different tests. Surgeon got it to the place where they were going to do the surgery. There's no blockage at all.
Oh, good.
So we're just saying, hallelujah. It's been many of us praying for and things like that all the time. So it's a grand adventure of mixing science with spirituality with creativity.
That's amazing, and that's a lovely place to leave it off. You sound like an incredibly busy lady. Now, for anyone watching, well, you are, aren't you,
I'm
basically?
having a ball. I'm having
Yeah,
a
well, there
ball.
you go. If you're enjoying it, carry on. And for anyone listening or watching this, Kay and I have, well, my part of the side of this, we've barely scratched the surface of all the stuff you do and in relation to medical intuitiveness. So check all the links in the description to Kay's sites, especially the Nomi one we mentioned. More information there. Kay, thank you ever so much for coming on. It's been much appreciated.
Thank you, Koit. I really appreciate it. It's been a blast to talk with you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Goodbye,
It's
everyone.
great to
Bye-bye.
talk with you. Bye-bye.
To watch other KoitCast episodes, please click the image top left. To subscribe to my channel, please click the image top right. Please like and share to help KoitCast grow, and most importantly of all, please click the notification bell so you never miss an upload.